everyone. Welcome to your first week of art appreciation. So this week is your introduction to the course. And so what I'm going to do here is introduce some basic concepts over the elements of art and principles of design that you will be discovering over the next few weeks. Please note that we're barely skimming the surface today. It's the briefest of overview. You will be reading all about these concepts in much more detail. Okay, so beginning with elements of art. Let's start with line. Remember, you want to take detailed notes. You're taking handwritten notes. It is for a grade, so feel free to pause if you need to. This specific video this week is easier because it is just definitions. It's shorter because you're getting acclimated to the class. I tried to make it a little shorter. Okay, so let's start with line. Is the path of a moving point with an art tool or a continuous mark made on a surface. They can vary in length, width, texture, direction, curve, etc. Here's some basic different lines. Now, what happens with art is that we sometimes are adding fancy terms to concepts you're already familiar with. What straight and right angles are and how those lines are made. But we're going to add the term rectilinear. So think like a rectangle. Rectilinear. So you would want to know that term. When you're taking notes over the video lectures in the next few weeks, this would be a term that you would highlight because you need to highlight those art appreciation terms. Okay, and curvilinear. So these are curved lines. Curved line, curvilinear. Okay. Forms. Oops, sorry, I skipped ahead. Shape is a two-dimensional enclosed space. We have geometric shapes. They're regular, they're measurable. Familiar with these versus organic shapes. These are more irregular and more natural. So let's say we're looking at an artwork, the human form. It would be much more curvilinear, right? We'd have more curvilinear lines, and the shape is more organic. Forms are three-dimensional objects that have height, width, and depth. They enclose space and take up space. Forms are also organic or geometric. And of course, these terms since elementary school. Value refers to the lightness or darkness of color. Color is produced when light strikes an object and reflects back in your eyes. I have a whole chapter about this. You learn all about these concepts. I'm excited for you. Okay, let's talk about color theory. So what are the primary colors? We have our primary triad, our red, yellow, and blue. And these are the colors that are required to make all other colors. Okay, there's our primary triad on the color wheel. What about our secondary colors? How are they made? So this is green, orange, and violet. The secondary triad are made by mixing two primaries together, right? This, yellow and red, orange, okay. Blue and yellow, green, okay. Red and blue, purple, or violet. Okay, that's our secondary triad. Okay, what are we missing? Colors are left are tertiary or intermediate colors. So this is red, violet, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. So these colors are made by mixing a primary with a secondary. And you always state the primary first. Okay, and there is our color wheel. Okay, some more terms. Here is our examples of analogous color schemes. So these are using colors that are adjacent, okay, right next to each other on the color wheel. We also have warm colors and cool colors. So consider how these warm colors, they make us feel warm. They're more comforting versus the cool colors. When you're describing feelings, oftentimes you associate being blue with being sad. And so these these colors have an impact on us. Okay. Complementary color schemes. These are when you're using colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So red and green, blue and orange. So we see some examples here. So they're directly opposite from each other. Versus our split complementary, and this is where instead of the ones directly across, you use the two colors next to the complement, such as this one, The red isn't using its complementary green. Instead, it's using the ones right next to it, our blue-green and our yellow-green. Okay, shade is adding black to a color, and tint is adding white to a color. So here on this image, we have white on the far left, pure red in the middle, black on the right side. So if you're adding black to your pure red, you're shading it. So think of like shadow. Okay, so this shade versus tint, we're adding white. Monochromatic color schemes are when you're using only shades and tints of one color, such as these blue monochromatic color scheme paintings here in quilt. Texture refers to the surface quality or feel of an object. It can be actual, so think of if you're looking at a sculpture and how there are incisions and fabric is sculpted versus the smooth skin. You can imagine that texture. I mean, you could reach out and touch it. Not that you ever should at a museum or anything, but you can feel the actual texture versus the implied texture. So think of these two-dimensional paintings in which, when we're looking at the one on the bottom left, I mean, you can imagine that cold silver metallic surface right there, that texture, that smooth texture. It's implied. Space in a work of art refers to a feeling of depth or three dimension. Again, these are paintings on two-dimensional surfaces. So we'll be analyzing how these artists achieve space. It can also refer to the artist's use of the area within the picture plane. So where in space are these objects located, etc. We also have negative space. So this is the empty or open areas surrounding and between the forms or objects in a work of art versus positive, which are the areas occupied by the main subject's forms or objects. So consider the lower left. This side of a sarcophagus is extremely chaotic. It is filled to the brim with subjects, figures, and forms and objects. So there's barely any negative space, no negative space, versus this one, where we have the positive space of the figures on horseback versus a lot of negative space around them. Okay, perspective is also a way of showing space in a work of art. Much of this page is going to sound like a foreign language to you. That is completely fine. See, it is planting these seeds. You're going to have a whole chapter on this. Essentially, you'll be learning all about space and depth. So linear perspective is when the artist uses a vanishing point on the horizon, uses lines, okay, to create a sense of deep space. Also by showing the objects getting progressively smaller as they get closer to the vanishing point. We'll go into that in more detail later. Also, how to show space is the concept of the background, okay, furthest away from us, help establishing the setting, the depth, the middle ground, the area between the background, and the foreground. This is the part of us the part of the picture plane that is closest to the viewer, okay, where these figures are. Okay, principles of design. So this is where, essentially, the principles of design are the ways the artists use those elements of art we just looked at to create good compositions, the arrangement. Okay, we'll be looking at these. So balance. The principle of design refers to the visual equalization of the elements in a work of art. It's the distribution of visual weight within a work of art. It refers to how elements are arranged to create a sense of stability. They can be symmetrical, asymmetrical, or radial, such as this asymmetrical composition by Van Gogh, where we have this uneven distribution. There's so much weight on this side with the cedar tree versus over here, but yet it still seems balanced. We'll discover the ways in which artists do this over the next coming weeks. Symmetrical balance, where the elements are pretty evenly arranged on both sides of a central axis. It creates stability and order. But please note, it does not have to be a mirror image, okay? There can be variation. And a radial balance. So this is where they're arranged around a central point, radiating outward evenly. It's an artwork you'll study. Versus contrast. This is a design principle that emphasizes differences between the art elements. So if we're looking at the oxbow, notice how on the left, the contrast between these two, such as the left with the storm, the darker colors, the greens, the broken branches, contrast with the right side, which is lighter, it's calm, it's organized. There's less going on, but notice how this contrast also draws more attention to the other. Okay, so it makes the other side stand out. So artists do this for specific meaning. Essentially, we're analyzing how artists and being able to recognize how they're drawing your attention to certain areas. All of this is intentional. Emphasis, the principle of design that's concerned with dominance, the development of a main idea or center of interest. And how they do this, the focal point. Our eyes are drawn to the center oftentimes. Variety is achieved when the art elements are combined in various ways to increase visual interest. It's one of the first abstract artworks ever by Vasily Kandinsky. Fun story, he has synesthesia, so whenever he hears music, he sees colors, and so oftentimes he would create paintings over what he is hearing. Unity and harmony, this principle refers to the visual quality of wholeness or oneness of an artwork. Gustav Klimt's The Kist is an excellent example of unity and harmony, where this contrast of the rectangles versus the circular objects on her, the male and the female, and the masculine and the feminine, and this idea of unity and harmony and balance is created. Proportion, the relationship in size of one component of a work of art to another. So Claes Oldenburg is known for creating these massive sculptures of everyday objects, enabling us to question what is art and seeing art in a new way. How these ordinary objects, now enlarged, huge proportions are artworks. Rhythm, a way of utilizing the art elements to produce the look and feel of rhythmic movement with a visual tempo or beat. So back to Van Gogh's Starry Night, where his thick impasto of paint really creates this sense of rhythm and movement, where it looks like each of these lines are moving. Okay, so movement produces the look of action or to cause the viewer's eye to sweep over the artwork. So our eyes kind of come into this spiral shape, drawing our attention to different areas. In The Triumph in the Name of Jesus, this is a ceiling painting. Okay, all of this is a painting. Okay. The Calling of St. Matthew, where our eyes, the Caravaggio manipulates light and uses it to draw our eyes to certain figures and line. These different elements of art. Pattern, the repetition of an element of art to achieve decoration or ornamentation. Yayoi Kusama is very known for her patterns. Repetition, a way of combining art elements so that the same elements are used over and over to achieve balance and harmony. Ai Weiwei, we'll look at his artwork at some point. The sunflower seeds. This repetition of these porcelain sunflower seeds. It's an interactive exhibition at the Tate Museum. Okay. And visual formal analysis. This is recognizing and understanding the visual choices of the artist, observing and analyzing separate parts of the art object to better understand the art as a whole. What does this mean? You will watch the next video by Smart History to understand what a formal analysis